Hi, I'm Ross Board, a director in RBC's Energy Transition team. I'm joined here today by Ralph Ibendahl, head of RBC's Energy Transition team, and we'll be talking about the competition between batteries, both from an electric vehicle perspective, but also in the context of energy storage. Ralph, good to have you here.
Yeah, it's great to be here.
Well, first of all, I'd like to start with just a question on how you're seeing the landscape unfolding for both EVs and battery storage. Is there increased competition, and how do you think that might play out?
It's clear that everybody's competing for the battery value chain, both the resources and the batteries themselves. Now, at the moment, everybody's relying very heavily on the Asian market, and Europe and the US have to follow suit to make sure that we don't become overly reliant on those markets, which is the case today. The second level of competition really is one, not just on the battery manufacturing side, but is also where the batteries actually get deployed, whether it's in utility scale storage or the electric vehicle ecosystem. How do you see that, Ross, within your client set in terms of how they're reacting to that sort of competition level?
Yeah, well, I think it's very clear to say that EVs take up the vast majority of market demand and purchasing power in terms of the battery value chain at the moment. So the likes of Volkswagen, Tesla, and various others are procuring long-dated contracts right back up the value chain with commodity players. So we're seeing Glencore, Rio Tinto all entering into these long-term supply agreements with auto OEMs. What that does is really drives an issue for the stationary storage and utility scale storage players in procurement. They clearly don't have the purchasing power of these large automakers. They're not able to enter into the same long-dated contracts, and that's forcing them to really think about what their supply chains look like. There is a degree of competition, particularly as demand for lithium-ion batteries is so elevated at the moment. But I think that's really important because price will drive innovation, it will drive more capacity, and we may see cheaper and more innovative technologies coming online thereafter. So really, the first 3 or 4 years of this is going to be quite a crunch, but thereafter we hope to see an easing of those circumstances as new things come online and new participants enter the market. Global policy is key to unlocking the battery value chain into the future. How are you seeing that unfolding, Ralph?
I think the geopolitical side of the equation here is very important, and regulation is always changing, and this is not just about an individual country or the EU as a whole, but it's also about how that compares globally against the US, against Asia. And that will drive deployment of capital, it'll drive innovation, and will ultimately decide who is a front runner across the battery ecosystem. But it's clearly not just all about policy. Technology innovation also comes into that. How do you see that evolving over the next few years?
That's a good question. In 2022, roughly 95% of all battery manufacturing capacity was lithium-ion based. We see a huge scope for innovation beyond that. Ultimately, lithium-ion will remain a dominant technology for now and into the future, but the high prices of battery cells and battery components is driving innovation as well. We're seeing innovation in sodium-ion, we're seeing innovation in solid-state batteries, and all kinds of material innovation thereafter, graphene, etc. So I think there's a huge opportunity for high prices to actually beget innovation, provide supply response in terms of the demand shortage that exists at the moment, and really develop the market further into the future. So Ralph, we started this conversation talking about competition between EVs and battery storage. Clearly we've ended up talking more about collaboration and coexistence. How do you see the outlook for that?
There's clearly competition between the EV side of the equation and the grid scale battery side of the equation in terms of actually access to batteries, access to raw materials, where do we have the manufacturing capacity, what is the regulatory environment like in Asia versus the US versus Europe. All of those are elements of competition, but at the same time, I think there's a lot of overlap between the markets, and what's good for an EV, for the EV market is also good for the storage market. Better batteries, cheaper batteries, batteries with different technologies and different use cases will help both markets develop and coexist and hopefully achieve net zero in an accelerated fashion.
This content is based on information available at the time it was recorded and is for informational purposes only. It is not an offer to buy or sell or a solicitation, and no recommendations are implied. It is outside the scope of this communication to consider whether it is suitable for you and your financial objectives.